What's up, Eager to Pleasers? Welcome back to another episode of the Eager to Please podcast. In true Eager to Please fashion, we're talking today about a topic that isn't always the most comfortable digging into, and that topic is finances. With the support of our amazing friends at Fresh Starts Registry, Olivia and Jenny, I'm so excited to welcome our next guest. Founder of Mindful Divorce Partners, with nearly 2 decades of experience as a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst, Melissa Pavone brings about a wealth of knowledge and strategy to help her clients protect themselves for the future. Not to mention, she's captured what she's seen and experienced over the years in a recently released book called Divorce by Design, which we'll dig into in a bit. Melissa, thanks for joining us. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, Natalie. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, I'd love to start by having you share a little bit about yourself and how you connected your background in financial planning with becoming a certified divorce financial analyst. You don't often hear of experts with a financial background helping people navigate divorce. So I'd love to hear your story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I got my CFP in 2012 and I got my CDFA in 2015. But I always say my why is my mom. Okay. I was a child of divorce and she made a lot of decisions with her heart instead of her head. And it has impacted her future. And I wish that she had a CDFA during her divorce. And so when I look at my clients, I always look at them and I hope to educate them and empower them so that they have more options and make better choices for them.
Absolutely. I had read too that you had said something about gaining clarity, I think when you were in one of your roles as a CFP and your client came back to you and was like, Melissa, this spreadsheet is beautiful, but it's so complicated. I don't understand what is going on here. And something in you just said, yeah, that needs to change. We need to make sure our people understand what our finances or what their finances look like in order to make educated decisions for their future, whether they're going through a divorce or whether they're just saving for the future. So I wanted to bring that up because I literally was in that situation. I have an accounting background, so not the same as finance, but, numbers related. Similar, yeah. Exactly. But I almost feel ashamed to admit this, like looking back in hindsight. For me, it'll be almost 3 years since our divorce. That was the one thing that I didn't pay attention to in my marriage because my husband is also an accountant. And he told me he would take care of everything and, take care of me and the family, which he did. Absolutely. But I almost felt like I was blindfolded with this it wasn't an endless pocketbook, but I just had no concept of our finances. And I would bring that up every once in a while. Very uncomfortable conversation because I had a right to know what our budget looked like, how much we were bringing in, what our retirement looked like. But every time I broached the subject, it was just an awkward conversation. And I felt like, I can't speak for him, but from my perspective, it felt like that was the one thing that he had control over in our relationship because I handled literally everything else, the kids, the house, running them to activities, the day to day. And so, like I said, looking back, I'm like, I'm almost ashamed to admit that. But if there's one thing that anyone listening to this podcast understands, it's that you have a right to know what your financial future looks like. So, yeah.
And absolutely. You're not the first person to say that. A lot of people come to me and they're embarrassed and there's shame. And I always tell them, think of today as ground zero. You're always going to know more. By the time that we're done through this process, I create a safe space for you to ask questions and I will go line item by line item and talk to you and teach you so that you feel empowered to make the right choice for you. And there's no shame, right? We all sort of fall in these roles in our relationship, right? Divorced or not divorced. I always say my husband doesn't necessarily know my son's shoe size. That doesn't make him a bad dad, right? It just means I'm in charge of buying shoes. And so we use that analogy to say that we've all been there and we all sort of do different roles in the marriage and in the relationships, and that you do have a right to know, right? But there's no shame and it's not helpful. But a lot of times people feel stuck in it because of that.
Absolutely. Exactly. Well, I did start this podcast on that premise to kind of heal from those, internal beatings that I was saying to myself, like, oh, you should have asked more questions, or you should have known better, or you shouldn't have let it get to that point, in hopes that I can do some reflection and growing and help other people going down that path realize the same thing. So from your experiences and just from having clients either going through divorce or not, I guess it doesn't really matter, just financial planning, like how do you think that people pleasing shows up in marriages or long-term relationships? And how does that positively or negatively affect their relationships with their finances?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times people, we sort of rewrite the narrative, right? I'm not good with money. I'm not good with numbers, right? And like we tell ourselves that, and we start to believe it, right? Or if someone else tells us that, we believe it. So I work a lot with sort of when we're moving forward, rewriting those stories, right? Rewriting those scripts. And it doesn't define you, right? We can change it. We could not be the best at it now, but it doesn't mean we can't improve. Mm-hmm. But I think money in general, right, is a very taboo topic to talk about.
Totally.
Oftentimes, right, like we always say, like you see the big houses and the fancy cars and the designer pocketbooks, right? And so we think that symbolizes money, but we don't see inside people's bank accounts or, oh, this is my 401k statement, this is my credit score. So it's weird, generationally that we don't talk about it. So, part of my mission is really just to increase the communication between couples and about money so that we don't necessarily end in divorce. And not just divorce doesn't always end because of finances, but it often is one of the leading causes of divorce is the lack of communication around finances. And I just think that part of it is due to it being taboo.
Yeah. Well, and kind of piggybacking off of that, I've seen finances rip families apart, whether someone has passed away and there's an inheritance to distribute. It's interesting that we all need money to survive. It's one of those like catch-22s, like you need it to survive, but it sometimes can be evil because it's not the most important thing in the world. And something that I have tried to instill in my kids that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how much you make. Are you happy? Are you healthy? Do you have good friends? Do you have people that love you? And, those other core values that are more important than just how much are you bringing home in your paycheck? So it's really hard. I feel like the comparison game plays a big role in it, it's like a hard thing to, say no to and just kind of push back on. But, we're all human and we all go down that path sometimes.
Absolutely. And to your point, right, it's not how much money you make, but oftentimes it's how much money you save, right? Because you can have one person making $1 million, but spending $1 million, and some person making $100,000 and they might be saving $20,000 a year, right? Like who's better off,
right?
In the long run. And talking about sort of time, I like to pull in time when we're talking about money, because we can make more money. It's a renewable resource, right? We can work more, we can make more money. Time is really the most precious asset that we have, and that's not renewable. So when we think about spending our money or investing our money, I like to look back at like, how much time will that buy us with friends and family and people we love, right? Can we sort of trade these things off versus, renew them often?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it says the financial planner, like you're always looking to the future. It's not about just present day. So it's about how soon can you retire?
I know. I mean, and that's like the big thing too. And I think that it's one of the things that sort of sets me apart from traditional financial planners is everyone, right, is sort of thinking for that future, like investing for retirement. Mm-hmm. But I like to look at it through like a wider lens. I really like to go back and look at your past and what can we learn from your past? Like, what are the money stories that you had coming into this relationship? Did you have an allowance? Did you know how much money you made? What does money mean to you? Because what money means to me might be totally different, Natalie, than what money means to you, right? Like, what are those stories we told ourselves? And then balancing that out with being present today, right? As a working mom and having kids, like there's so much more that we have to balance. So like learning from our past, investing for our future, but staying really present today. It's a balancing act and not one that people can do easily, right? And it's easy to get caught up with that, keeping up with the Joneses and sort of that comparison game. And I think there's like a whole nother layer of it when it comes to children on teaching them the value of a dollar, and especially today in like the cashless society that we live in.
That I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it actually blows my mind that it's almost like fake money. They have no concept of holding a dollar or counting change out, because it's always like put it on the credit card or order it on Amazon, and they don't know that that's linked to a credit card, but you have to make sure you have money in your account to pay that credit card off at some point. So, oh my goodness, I know so many things I feel like our kids are missing out on just because it is just instant and they don't see it and touch it.
Yeah. And it's one of those like pluses and minuses of technology, right? Like I remember one day my daughter, her water bottle broke, which, as you know, as a mom of a child, or the water bottle is like the end all be all. Meanwhile, I don't think I ever drank water as a child. Like it was like a water fountain at school, but like now there's like a cabinet filled of like all these designer water bottles. But my daughter's water bottle broke, and like I put her to bed, and the next day, like multitasking, going like, I just ordered a new one, and like before school the next day it like appeared, and she's like, oh great, a new water bottle. And I like thought to myself, like, one, how great is that like in my pajamas while I'm like plucking my eyebrows, I could order a water bottle. But then at the same time I was like, it's sort of like I wiggled my nose, right? And it just like appeared out of thin air. And I was like, she didn't see me work for it. She didn't see me go to the store. She didn't see me exchange money for it. All of those things happen. And it's like, we sometimes miss out on those learning opportunities to be like, don't break your water bottle again, and how this impacts them. So I think it's challenging as parents in this day and age with the cashless society and technology, what we have to like work on. And
yes,
it's a blessing and a curse.
All of the above. Well, I also feel too that, we do the same thing with our kids. If something breaks or goes missing, we're ordering it just so they're comfortable, and it's like, it's okay for you to sit in the uncomfortable feeling for a minute. Yeah, you broke that. I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait until I have time to deal with that. And yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that we struggle with as parents too, just that balance between, yes, you want your kids to have everything and be comfortable and do for them what, you didn't have done for you, but at the same time, having them understand that you do have to work for that, or it might take a little bit of time to get that. So yeah, all very interesting stuff. So on the flip side of all of that, you gave some great advice for what people should look out for as far as, when they're considering finances. But what are some pitfalls or common mistakes that you've seen people make as they're either navigating a divorce or just trying to figure out, what their finances look like to plan for the future? What are some things that you've seen people slip up on?
Specifically to divorce, I think that people often want to get it done quickly because they're in pain.
Yeah.
And when they want to speed up that process, they're emotionally not regulated, right? So they're just trying to like sort of stop the pain, and they're making rash decisions, and they're reacting. They're instead of being proactive. And you should not, right? I can't say you cannot, because people do it all the time, make long-term financial decisions in heightened emotional states, right? It's just not good for long-term. So I always say, as a CDFA, I have the ability to look at future you, right? So you're trying to survive the day. I have the ability to zoom out and see how the decisions that you're going to make today are going to impact you 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And when you're in it, you can't see it, right? Yeah. You're in survival mode. And I am not emotionally affected by the divorce. Yeah, I'm empathetic, right? But I'm not emotionally invested in this. And so I become your eyes and ears so that we can make rational decisions when it comes to your finances, because sometimes they're not reversible.
That's true. Very true. So what are some things that you would coach your clients through as far as staying grounded through a difficult situation such as a divorce?
I always lead with the team approach. So even before people come to me to help with their finances, my number one question is like, how are you being emotionally supported? Do you have a divorce coach? Do you have a mental health professional? How is your support system, friends and family? Because that is number one. Because it is less efficient to come to me when you're emotionally irregulated.
Right.
Because it's going to take double the work, right? You're just not going to grasp it. And it's going to sort of, you're still on the roller coaster emotionally. So that's my number one, is to like make sure that we have that emotional piece in place. And I'm a big proponent of, mental health and meditation. And so having that is like number one, to be grounded. And number two with your finances is like go in with eyes wide open. There's no shame, right? I tell people like, we're going to get financially naked together. And like, I am not here to judge you, right? I am just here to like hold your hand and guide you through this process. And then after that is when we sort of look for the legal support, right? Whether that's mediation or collaborative or the sole agree process or straight litigation if we have to go that route. But I think the order matters. Oftentimes people jump straight to the attorney because they feel like, okay, they're going to protect me, right? Like, okay, we're going to get, you see it all the time on Facebook. I would need the biggest, baddest shark in town, right? Like, no, we don't want to start with the highest paid person on the team, right? Like, so the premise of the whole book is really to design your divorce and to do it efficiently. So I always say, if you have an attorney, you don't want them to look over your finances. I can do it in half the time because that is what my brain is trained to do. Mm-hmm. And my rate is probably half as what your attorney is, right? And same thing with me. You don't want to waste money with me talking to me and venting about what happened at the birthday party or the text message that was sent, because one, I'm not trained in mental health. And two, you can have a divorce coach or a mental health professional do it at half of my rate, right? So if we are strategic about it, we can have 3 people supporting you throughout this process, and then you can feel supported. And that's really the most important process because it's hard. Divorce is expensive. It's emotionally draining. It's financially draining. You really want to feel supported throughout it.
Absolutely. In fact, that's something that I have learned more and more just as I distance myself from my divorce. And it's just leaning on the people that are supporters of you and that love you, because it is, I don't want to say, for me, I just felt shameful and embarrassed and all of the emotions that go with it, all the things. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I'm not talking about that. I'm not going to tell anyone about it. And it's very isolating when you put yourself in that bucket. So yeah. Yes, I agree with that. So the team approach is awesome. Well, I think honestly, this is the perfect segue to get into your new book, Divorce by Design. I know you touched on that just briefly. What was the story behind writing it?
I just felt, as I was meeting with all of my clients throughout, that I was giving them this information for the first time, like that there were divorce coaches and what a CDFA is. And oftentimes people are like, where were you 10 years ago? And like, I think the common thing is that everybody knows, okay, we can just go straight to an attorney, right? And mediation has now become more popular and amicable to be, divorce outside of court, which I'm a big proponent of. But now there's collaborative divorce, right? There's sort of like a co-mediation section where the CDFA and a mediator can work together. There's so many professionals. And I realized as I was, connecting with all of them and growing my business, I'm like, people don't know this, right? And you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So the book is really for the end user of those who are quietly thinking about divorce, just really general knowledge of like who the players are, who do you need, and which order to do it in, and what the different processes are that you get to choose from. Because I think that people need to know that there are options. They often go to one person, right? They have that consult and they're like, yes, okay, you seem like you know what you're doing. You're using big words. I'm going to give you all my money and just like trust that you have my whole future and my whole family's future in your hands. Mm-hmm. When in actuality, right, there's different people for that. And like we can create a whole team around you and let you know that there's different options out there.
Yeah. I know that you're not divorced personally, but what's your favorite part of the book? What is your, I guess, the most helpful part that you would recommend?
I'm not divorced, and people always ask me that all the time. And I remember like my mother-in-law, she's like, when I was like studying she's like, there's a lot of divorce books around. And I'm like, don't worry, Mom, like we're good. Don't worry. But yeah, I think I think the overall message of the book is just like to become educated and informed. And that's like sort of my mission, right? I just really want people to know what they're agreeing to before they agree to it. I don't want them to have divorce remorse. My mom regrets a lot of things because she just didn't know, and it wasn't her fault. She just had one attorney, and the attorney, did not have a team approach, did not educate her on all the things that could have happened. Mm-hmm. And I want to save people from being in that situation in the future.
Yeah, I love that. Putting something that was not so pleasant into something that's, helpful. Yeah, no, yeah. I love that. So you're the founder of Mindful Divorce Partners. And the term mindful divorce, I feel like it's not something that we hear every day, or at least together. So I'm curious how you paired those two words together. I know you said that you're big into mindfulness, but I'm curious how those two words got merged together.
Yeah, I think that divorce really has such a negative connotation. Oh. And, just like you said before, there's a lot of shame in it, and it doesn't have to be, right? There is a redirection and sort of a rebirth. So I think by putting that mindfulness and really thinking about it so that, again, it's not a knee-jerk reaction, but instead a choice, right? Because just like marriage is a choice, divorce is a choice, to sort of redirect where you're going. And I'm not pro-divorce by any means. I'm happily married, but I really want there to be thought process in it, and really the education piece and the communication, I think, is really important around it.
Yeah, I love that. So for someone listening in the middle of a painful ending right now, what would you want them to hear?
That there's light at the end of the tunnel, that you probably can't see it yet, but there is this whole sort of next chapter that, hasn't been written yet. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity to sort of like do some inner work. And that's where that mindfulness comes in, to like, who are you now, right? Like, who do you want to be? Being a mom or being a wife doesn't necessarily define who you are, right? That's part of it, but there is more to it. And sometimes we lose ourselves, right? Sometimes we lose our career. Sometimes we lose our friends. But we can sort of rebuild what that looks like, and to really just feel supported throughout, because divorce can be very isolating and lonely. So hiring the right professionals and feeling supported really can make or break the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sticking with you on that whole team aspect. I feel like the more people you have supporting you, the easier it is to get through the situation that's so difficult to begin with. So
yeah,
going back to the whole people pleaser aspect of things, because not everyone is a people pleaser, and some people kind of know where their boundaries are and know how to stand up for themselves. But especially people pleasers, when they're feeling vulnerable and this kind of situation, what does it cost them in a divorce that you have seen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things there. Sometimes people don't realize that they're being financially abused, and people use, right, money means power, right, in their relationship. And so if you feel like if you were the stay-at-home parent, right, or the lesser earning spouse, that you don't have a say or you don't have access to. And so part of the work that I do is really just that education piece, right? Like what do I own? I say there's 5 numbers that everybody should know. It's the assets, what you own, the liabilities, what you owe, your income, what you earn, your expenses, what you spend, and your credit score. And everyone should know that. Married, single, divorced, widowed, those numbers are really important and sort of the foundation. And when you get clear on that, and sometimes, like you said, it's uncomfortable to talk about money, but just do it, right? We all need money. We need money to go out to eat and pay groceries and, like all the things. So I think that we just have to rip off the Band-Aid and have those uncomfortable conversations, but know that you're entitled to know these things, even if you are not the, CFO of the family per se.
Yep.
You have a right? Like there's normally a joint tax return. There's normally assets that are joint, like bank accounts that are joint. So you have access to it, even if it's not given to you. If you're on a joint account, you can go to the bank and ask for your own username and password, right? If you sign a joint tax return, you have the ability to call the accountant and say, hey, can I get a copy of this? So there are ways, even if you're sort of in the dark financially, for you to get some clarity even before sort of having that conversation, or if your spouse is blocking you from that. But the people pleaser, which again was my mom, and I love her. She's the biggest heart ever. But she thought that if she gave in to some of the concessions, right, for the divorce, that things would go smoother, or they would be able to maintain a friendship and it would be better for the family. And it wasn't, right? And it was sort of like a short-term fix, and it had a long-term impact. So that people pleasing is not going to serve you well, right? We really have to sort of look inward, and that's sort of the power of having a CDFA is for me to become, or, for a CDFA to become your eyes and your ears, right? Because the emotions easily take over, right? And so I sort of try to take the emotion out of it. I acknowledge it. I empathize with you, but we have to think logically and into the future. And I think like, okay, what would future you want?
Yeah.
And what is future you going to regret?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Melissa, I have to ask this question because I'm dying. Since you have so many years of experience with financial planning, and now you've brought in the whole helping people going through life changes, why is it so hard for people to talk about finances? It's just money. It's literally just money. Why is it so uncomfortable to talk about it?
I think because of generationally, it was so taboo, and we haven't changed that stigma. I think about it as like sort of like mental health 5 years ago, right? Yeah. 10 years ago, it was like, oh, we don't talk about this. It was sort of like, and now, right, we sort of like as a society, like, yeah, we need help. We need, and it's very much talked about and encouraged. But I think we're sort of on that cusp right now. And I'm really hoping to like help change and be part of that movement, because I think it will be so good for just friendships, relationships, marriages, having that communication around money. But I think back in the day, people just didn't talk about it, right? It was like, just like we said, taboo, and that it just kind of came with us. And we all come in with different money stories, right? Yeah. So some of us think money equals power. Some of us think money, is the devil, right? Like if, we sort of seen, so it really goes back to how money was viewed growing up as a child, and like knowing that, right? And thinking about our prior conversation about the water bottle and how we try to like teach our children. I feel such a pressure of like how we talk about money too with our children, right? So, my daughter once asked me not that long ago, she's like, Mom, are we millionaires? Aww. And like me and my husband looked at each other like, okay, this is a trick question. Like, how do we answer this? Right. We're like, we don't want to like say yes and then tell everyone, like, yes, we're millionaires. Then we're like, but we also don't want to like say no. Like, so we're like treading really lightly, and we're like, we're not, but we're still saving, and she's like, are we thousandaires? And I was like, yes, we are thousandaires. Yes.
Oh, that's so sweet.
But, like the kids, they hear things and they see things, and, like they associate, like I heard, kids over here, the kids talk about things, and it's funny to hear it from their point of view. Right. And like me as a professional, and then just like as a normal adult, and it's so hard, right, to balance it. And there's no like sort of right or wrong, but just being able to talk about it and being able to talk about, I think, the time value of money and like the power of compound interest with our children is just like, hey, like one of the things that we try to do is when we go on vacation, we give the kids some money and say like, hey, this is your $20. Well, it used to be $20. Now I think we have to give $40 so everything's so expensive. But like, this is your money. If you want to blow it on ice cream and candy, great. If you want to buy a sweatshirt, great. If you want to take it home and save it, also great. But like, you have to make these choices. But not every store we go into, you get to get something, right? Because we're sort of like the endless ATMs as parents. So having those sort of teachable moments. And like, I remember one time my kids were like pooling their money together, like, all right, well, we can get double the amount, like get 2 scoops of ice cream instead of 1 scoop, and we could share it, and then we can have more money for this. And I was like, all right, we're
love
doing
it. See, there you go. You're teaching your kids teamwork. I love that, Melissa.
But it's not easy, right? And so like I go back, it's like, again, that balancing act of like, yeah, I didn't do great with the water bottle just showing up miraculously, wiggling my nose. But like on the vacation, we try to like instill like, okay, these are the choices. And, you know, like that delayed gratification, because I think we live in a world of instant gratification that it's really hard to teach the children delayed gratification.
100%. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. You are riding the wave of the movement of opening up conversation about finances, because not everyone has the financial planning background that you do. So I feel like you're a leg up on us, but you wear both hats. You wear, you know, the parent hat where you're trying to teach your kids everything that we're all teaching our kids, but you also have the education behind the financial side of things. So I love that. So before I let you go, is there anything that we haven't talked about, either about your book or anything in general that you would like our listeners to be mindful of?
No, I think that having the right team in place can make or break it. And that divorce really doesn't have to define you, right? If you choose to go through divorce, go in eyes wide open with a team to support you. And before you sort of throw in the towel, if finances is one of those issues, try to communicate with your spouse and see if, you can sort of repair that. And if you're listening and you're in a healthy, happy marriage, continue that conversation. I like to call them like quarterly date nights and make it fun, right? Like sort of like, all right, are we planning a vacation this quarter? Are we saving for something? Where are we at with our credit card debt, paying it down? Get your favorite bottle of wine, get takeout, make it fun so it doesn't have to be painful. And it's something to look forward to. And I think keeping that communication is just really key.
Yeah, I love that. Where can our listeners find you? I know that you have a website and your book is now out, so we'll make sure we link those to the Divorce by Design book link. But on socials, where can we find you?
Yeah, Mindful Divorce Partners. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, LinkedIn. So yeah, and mindfuldivorcepartners.com. I offer complimentary consultations. If I'm not the right fit for you, I'm happy to connect you with another CDFA that is. And if you're post-divorce and sort of trying to rebuild, I do a lot of work in that space as well. And I think that's sort of an underserved community, because through the divorce process, you might be really supported, right? If you have a team, but then all of a sudden it's like you're grieving. Right? It's like, okay, the funeral's over, the wake is over, right? The ink is dried, we signed, and it's like, now what, right? Everyone else's lives sort of go back to normal, and you have this new normal that you have to navigate. So I think that's really overwhelming for some. And I do a lot of like post-divorce financial checkups, right? Really help you dot your I's and cross your T's. There's a lot that has to be done afterwards that unfortunately gets missed. And it's sort of like everyone moves on. But you have to like update your car insurance and close out joint bank accounts. And are you changing your name, right? Like, did we redo our wills? And do we have to find a new accountant or a new financial advisor, update our beneficiaries? There's a lot to be done there. So,
oh yeah.
A lot. Yeah. And nobody really talks about that. It's sort of like they just want to get you to the finish line. But once we're at the finish line, there's still like another lap that we got to do.
That's right.
So I help people on that side too, as a certified financial planner at Mindful Financial Partners.
Nice. Yeah, I did see 2 names, so I wasn't sure. So that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you, Melissa, for joining us. I really appreciate your time and for all of your insights. It's been great.
Thanks so much for having me.